In 1960, a young astronomer named Frank Drake did something simple. He pointed a radio telescope at two stars. He was at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory in Green Bank, West Virginia. The telescope was 85 feet wide. The project was called Ozma. It cost about $2,000. Drake aimed the telescope at Tau Ceti and Epsilon Eridani. They are stars like our sun and relatively close. He listened for a signal. He tuned the receiver to 1420 megahertz. This is the frequency of hydrogen gas, the most common element in the universe. He thought another intelligent species might use it as a cosmic hailing frequency, a universal dial tone. The project ran for about 150 hours between April and July. He found nothing but static and a false alarm from a secret military experiment. But the act itself was profound. For the first time, humanity wasn't just looking at the stars. It was listening. It was an admission that we might not be alone. If Drake had heard a structured artificial signal that day, everything would have changed in an instant. The world of April 1960 would have been a different planet from the world of May 1960. Our history, our future, our understanding of ourselves would have been split in two. The time before the signal and the time after. We are still in the time before. But the moment that changes, and it could be any moment, a cascade of changes will wash over the world. They will be immediate and irreversible. Number 15, our gods would suddenly seem very small. More than 8 out of every 10 people on Earth identify with a religious group. That's over 5.8 billion people. The Vatican has operated an observatory for centuries, and in 2008, its director, Father Jose Funes, stated that believing in alien life is not a contradiction of faith. Some Islamic scholars point to the Quran's reference to worlds in the plural as evidence that life beyond Earth is compatible with their faith. The Raelian movement, a UFO religion founded in 1974, already has tens of thousands of members who believe life on Earth was created by extraterrestrials. The discovery would land like a boulder in the quiet pond of human faith. Every major world religion is, at its core, a story about humanity. They are geocentric, they place our world and our species at the center of a divine plan. A signal from the stars would challenge this instantly. The Abrahamic faiths would face the most acute crisis. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam share a common story of creation centered on Earth. For Christians, the question would be immediate and profound. Was Jesus' sacrifice on Earth for the sins of humanity or for the sins of the entire universe? If other beings exist, do they have their own saviors? Did the Son of God have to be crucified on a million different worlds to save a million different species? The theology becomes complicated very quickly. Some would argue that the incarnation was a singular event for all creation. Others would find this idea absurd. It would force a schism between literal interpretations and more metaphorical ones. For Islam, the role of Prophet Muhammad as the final prophet to mankind would be questioned. Is he the final prophet for humans only, or for all intelligent life? The Quran is the word of God for mankind. Do other worlds have their own books, their own prophets? The sheer scale of the universe would make our own sacred stories feel provincial. They would seem like local tales, not cosmic truths. Eastern religions like Hinduism and Buddhism might adapt more easily. Their cosmology is already vast. They contain concepts of countless worlds, cyclical time stretching over trillions of years, and various forms of sentient beings or devas. The discovery of alien life could be seen as simple confirmation of what their texts have been describing all along. But even for them, the reality would be different from the myth. It would be one thing to speak of life on other lokas or planes of existence. It would be another to receive a data stream from a real physical planet orbiting a specific star. It would ground the abstract in the concrete, which could be just as disruptive. Beyond the established faiths, new ones would bloom overnight. Some people would undoubtedly begin to worship the aliens. They would be seen as gods, or as messengers from God. Cults would form around interpreting their signals. And they would be the new angels, the new prophets. Think of the cargo cults of the Pacific, who saw advanced technology from visiting ships and planes and incorporated it into their religious practices. Now, apply that to the entire planet. We would have data cults poring over alien transmissions for divine meaning. We would have contact cults preparing for their physical arrival as a form of salvation. At the same time, many would see the aliens as demonic, a great deception sent to lead humanity astray. This would fuel fundamentalism and apocalyptic beliefs. The aliens would be cast as the antagonists in a pre-written divine drama. It would be proof that the end times are near. This reaction could be just as powerful and widespread as the impulse to worship. The core problem is that our religions are about us. They answer human questions about human origins and human destiny. The discovery of another intelligence, especially an older, more advanced one, would recontextualize everything. It would suggest that the universe is not about us. We are just one small part of a much larger, more complex story. For many, this would be a liberating realization, expanding their sense of the divine. For many others, it would feel like an eviction notice from the center of creation. Their faith, the bedrock of their life, would be shaken to its foundation. The world's cathedrals, mosques, synagogues, and temples would be filled with people asking questions their leaders could not answer. Number 14, every science textbook would become instantly obsolete. As of today, we know of only one example of life in the entire universe, life on Earth. All biology, from the smallest bacterium to the largest whale, is based on a single template. It uses DNA and RNA. It is carbon-based. It requires liquid water. This one data point informs every single biology textbook on the planet. The famous Miller-Urey experiment in 1952, which created amino acids from simple chemicals, was a landmark in understanding how our kind of life might begin. It has been cited in thousands of textbooks. The habitable zone around a star, often called the Goldilocks zone, is defined entirely by the conditions needed for liquid water, a key ingredient for our kind of life. The moment we confirm extraterrestrial life, all of this becomes history. It becomes a footnote. The discovery would, in a single stroke, create a new field of science comparative biology. We would go from a sample size of 1 to a sample size of 2. That is an infinite increase in knowledge. First, the very definition of life would have to be rewritten. Our current definitions are descriptive of life on Earth. They often include things like metabolism, growth, response to stimuli, and reproduction. What if the alien life form is a crystalline entity that grows by adding to its lattice structure over millions of years? What if it's a gas-based consciousness living in the clouds of a gas giant? What if it's based on silicon instead of carbon, using methane instead of water? The fundamental assumptions of biology would be shattered. Textbooks would have to be recalled and pulped. University courses would be redesigned from the ground up. The periodic table would be viewed in a new light. We've always focused on carbon as the basis for complex chemistry. It can form 4 bonds, creating stable, complex chains. Silicon is right below it on the periodic table and can also form 4 bonds, but its bonds are weaker. We have dismissed it as a likely candidate for life. If we find silicon-based life, chemists would have to re-evaluate the potential of the entire periodic table for forming biological systems. The field of astrobiology would transform from a largely theoretical discipline into a practical, data-driven one. Right now, astrobiologists spend their time studying extremophiles on Earth creatures that live in volcanic vents, deep sea trenches, or frozen Antarctic lakes. They do this to understand the absolute limits of life as we know it. The discovery would give them a new subject. It would give them the limits of life as we don't know it. And what if the signal we receive isn't just a simple, "we are here" beacon? What if it's a data dump? An Encyclopedia Galactica? The scientific impact would be staggering. We might receive their understanding of physics. It could be that our theories of general relativity and quantum mechanics are just a kindergarten level approximation of a much deeper reality. A unified field theory, the holy grail of modern physics, could be handed to us. We might learn about new forms of energy, new ways to travel, or the nature of dark matter and dark energy, which make up 95% of the universe but remain a complete mystery to us. Our most brilliant scientists would become students again. Decades, maybe centuries of planned research would be accomplished in an afternoon. But it would also be a crisis for the scientific community. Science is a process of discovery. It's about the struggle, the dead ends, the slow accumulation of knowledge. What happens when the answers are just given to you? It could lead to an unprecedented age of technological advancement. It could also lead to a withering of human scientific curiosity. Why spend years trying to solve a problem when the answer is in chapter 7 of the Alien Encyclopedia? It would be the ultimate cheat sheet. The discovery would also force a re-evaluation of our own planet's history. The theory of panspermia, the idea that life on Earth may have originated from microbes traveling through space on asteroids or comets, is currently a fringe theory. If we find alien life that shares a common chemical ancestor with us, panspermia would become the leading explanation for our own existence. It would mean we are, in a very real sense, aliens ourselves. Our entire evolutionary history would need a new first chapter. Every science, from biology and chemistry to physics and astronomy, would face a revolution unlike any in human history. Number 13, national borders would lose their meaning. The Outer Space Treaty of 1967, signed by over 110 nations, including the US and Russia, states that outer space is not subject to national appropriation by claim of sovereignty. It is the common province of all mankind. This treaty was written when space was empty. The United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, UNUSA, exists to promote international cooperation in the peaceful uses of outer space. Its budget is a tiny fraction of what nations spend on their individual military forces. A confirmed signal from an alien civilization would instantly render our political divisions absurd. The concept of being an American, a Chinese, a Nigerian, or a Brazilian would feel insignificant. The primary identity would become human. We would be defined not by what separates us on our little planet, but by what separates us from them out there. This would create an immense pressure for global unity. Who speaks for Earth? The question would not be philosophical, it would be a practical emergency. Would the United States, with its history of space exploration, take the lead? Would China, with its rapidly growing space program? Would it be the United Nations? The UN is our only global political body, but it is slow, bureaucratic, and often powerless. It would need to be reformed and empowered on a scale never before seen. A new global body, a true planetary council, would likely need to be formed. Its first job would be to decide if we should even respond to the signal, and if so, what should we say? This single question would be the most important decision in human history. A message crafted by one nation could misrepresent the entire species. A hasty, aggressive, or foolish message could endanger us all. The need for a single, unified voice would be paramount. This would require an unprecedented level of international cooperation, forcing old rivalries to be set aside. The conflicts in the Middle East, the tensions in the South China Sea, the political squabbles in every corner of the world, they would all seem like arguments among children while the adults are at the door. Of course, unity is not the only possible outcome. The discovery could just as easily become the ultimate political football. And nations might compete for control of the signal and any subsequent communication. The nation that controls the dialogue with the aliens controls the potential technology, knowledge, and prestige that comes with it. It would be a new kind of Cold War, a contact war. Secret services would work overtime to try and monopolize the communication channel. The Green Bank Observatory, or whichever facility received the signal, would become the most strategically important piece of real estate on the planet, surrounded by military forces. It could also lead to global paranoia, like who are these aliens? Are they friendly? Are they a threat? The lack of information would be a breeding ground for fear. This fear could be exploited by authoritarian leaders to consolidate power. They could use the potential alien threat to justify surveillance, suspend civil liberties, and increase military spending. Instead of uniting humanity, the discovery could create a global state of emergency, a planetary martial law. The very concept of national sovereignty would be challenged. If an alien ship were to arrive, where would it land? If it landed in Kansas, is it on US soil or is it on Earth soil? The laws are not clear. The Outer Space Treaty deals with celestial bodies, it doesn't deal with visitors. The legal and political ramifications are a minefield. Our entire system of international relations, built over centuries around the concept of the nation-state, would be inadequate for the new reality. The discovery would force us to think as a species, whether we are ready to or not. Our little maps with their colored-in countries would look like relics from a forgotten age. Number 12. A new alien economy would emerge overnight. The Apollo program cost the United States an estimated $25.4 billion in 1969, which is over $280 billion in today's money. This massive investment created new industries in computing, materials science, and telecommunication. The private space economy is now valued at over $400 billion and is projected to grow to over $1 trillion by 2040. This is all based on us simply trying to get off our own planet. The discovery of alien life would trigger an economic boom unlike anything ever seen. It would dwarf the Industrial Revolution or the Internet Revolution. A new sector, the alien economy or exoeconomy, would be born in an instant. The first and most immediate effect would be a massive global investment in science and technology. And funding for astronomy, astrophysics, computer science, and engineering would skyrocket, where governments would pour trillions of dollars into building new, more powerful telescopes, both on the ground and in space. They would need to listen more carefully and in all directions. They would need to build transmitters capable of sending a reply. This would be a new global space race, but instead of one competitor, it would be all of humanity racing to understand the signal. Companies involved in aerospace, communications, and data analysis would see their values explode. If the aliens share any technological information, the disruption would be total. Imagine they transmit the secret to clean, limitless fusion energy. The global energy market, based on oil, gas, and coal, would collapse. The economies of entire nations built on fossil fuels would be wiped out. At the same time, it would solve climate change and provide cheap energy for everyone, leading to an age of unbelievable prosperity. Or what if they share the secret to advanced materials or artificial intelligence or medicine that extends human life by centuries? Entire industries would be created and entire industries would be destroyed. The transition would be chaotic and potentially violent as the old economic powers refuse to give up their positions. There would also be an alien bubble on the stock market. Anything even remotely related to space or aliens would attract frantic investment. New companies would spring up with names like Exotech, Celestial Comms, or Alpha Centauri Ventures. Most would be worthless, but it would create a speculative frenzy. The market would be incredibly volatile. Fear and greed would drive massive swings. A new piece of data from the signal could cause markets to crash or soar. The world of marketing and branding would be transformed. The aliens would be the biggest celebrities in history. Their image, if we had one, would be used to sell everything from cars to soft drinks. It would be a cultural and commercial phenomenon. There's also a darker economic side. What if the alien technology is a weapon? The nation or corporation that deciphers it first would have an unimaginable military advantage. This would lead to a frantic and secret arms race with private military contractors and national intelligence agencies competing to unlock the secrets. The price of that knowledge would be incalculable, and who owns the information? Does the observatory that received it have the rights, the government of the country it's in? Or does it belong to all of humanity? There would be immense legal battles over the intellectual property of the signal itself. Corporations would try to patent alien technologies. This raises a fundamental question. Can you patent something you didn't invent but were just told about? The very concept of value might change. What is the value of a piece of gold or a dollar bill in a universe that contains beings who might be able to travel between stars? Our entire economic system is based on scarcity. The discovery could introduce concepts of post-scarcity. If energy is limitless and materials can be fabricated from basic elements, what do we work for? What is the purpose of an economy? The discovery wouldn't just change our stock portfolios. It would challenge the very foundations of capitalism and every other economic system we've ever devised. Number 11. The definition of human would no longer be ours alone. In 1633, the Catholic Church condemned Galileo for his claim that the Earth revolves around the sun. This was not just an astronomical dispute, it was a philosophical one. It removed humanity from the physical center of the universe. In 1859, Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species, which showed that humans were not a special creation but had evolved from other animals. This removed humanity from the biological center of the world. Each of these events was a profound shock to our collective ego. The discovery of extraterrestrial intelligence would be the third and greatest of these shocks. It would remove humanity from its self-appointed position at the center of intelligence and consciousness. We define ourselves by what we are not. We are not animals. We are not machines. We are the thinking, feeling, art-creating species. This is the core of humanism, the philosophical stance that has dominated Western thought for centuries. It places human beings as the ultimate source of value and meaning. Finding another intelligent species would shatter this. We would no longer be the sole proprietors of thought. We would no longer be the universe's only consciousness looking out at a silent and unthinking cosmos. We would become just one of a group. This would force a complete re-evaluation of our place in the universe. Are we average? Are we below average? Are we the cosmic equivalent of an uncontacted tribe in the Amazon, unaware of the vast civilization that surrounds us? This realization would have deep psychological effects. For some, it would be a source of immense relief. The burden of being the only thinking beings in a vast empty universe is a heavy one. Knowing we are not alone could ease a kind of cosmic loneliness we weren't even fully aware we had. It could inspire a new sense of purpose and a flourishing of art, music, and philosophy fueled by this new, expanded context. For others, it would trigger a profound existential crisis. If we are not special, what is our purpose? If our greatest achievements are art, our science, our philosophies are just mediocre productions by galactic standards, what is their value? It could lead to a species-wide sense of inferiority and despair. If the aliens are vastly older and more advanced, we might feel like infants. This cosmic inferiority complex could be paralyzing. Our relationship with other life on our own planet would also have to change. We currently justify our domination of Earth and its other species by our superior intelligence. We run the planet because we are the smartest ones here. If we are no longer the smartest ones in the universe, that justification becomes weaker. The discovery could lead to a new respect for other forms of life on Earth. If consciousness is not unique to us, perhaps we should look more closely for it in dolphins, primates, or even octopuses. It could fuel the animal rights and environmental movements with a powerful new philosophical argument. We would be forced to see ourselves not as the masters of life, but just as one of its many expressions. The language we use would change. The word human itself would take on a new meaning. It would become a specific planetary label like Martian or Venusian in old science fiction. We might start to refer to ourselves as Earthlings or Terrans in a non-ironic way. The concept of human rights might evolve into sentient rights, a code of ethics that could apply to any intelligent being, whether it's made of carbon or silicon, whether it's from Earth or from a planet orbiting Tau Ceti. The discovery would be the ultimate mirror. For the first time, we would be able to see ourselves from an outside perspective. We would be forced to define what it means to be human, not just to ourselves, but to someone else. And in doing so, we might finally understand ourselves for the first time. Number 10, mass hysteria would become the new normal. On October 30th, 1938, Orson Welles' Mercury Theater on the Air broadcast a radio adaptation of H.G. Wells's The War of the World. It was presented as a series of simulated news bulletins. Despite multiple announcements that it was a dramatization, a significant number of people believed it was a real news report of a Martian invasion. Newspapers at the time reported widespread panic, though the scale of this panic has since been debated by historians. The event, real or exaggerated, showed how easily a population could be tipped into fear by a believable but terrifying story. In today's world of social media, 24-hour news cycles, and disinformation, the effect would be magnified 1,000 times. The moment an official announcement is made, a wave of panic would sweep the globe. It wouldn't matter if the announcement stressed that it was just a signal and the source was light years away. The human brain is not well equipped to deal with abstract, distant threats. It would be perceived as an immediate crisis. Supermarket shelves would be emptied within hours. People would hoard food, water, gasoline, and medical supplies. Gun and ammunition sales would spike. There would be a run on the banks as people tried to pull out their cash, fearing a collapse of the financial system. This behavior is predictable. We see it on a smaller scale before a big hurricane or during the early days of a pandemic. But this would be global. The supply chains that keep our modern world running are fragile. Widespread panic buying would shatter them, leading to real shortages and creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of collapse. Misinformation would spread like wildfire. Social media would be flooded with fake videos of alien ships, doctored satellite images, and false claims from people pretending to be insiders. It would be impossible for the average person to tell what is real and what is not. Every government and scientific body would be trying to control the narrative, but they would be drowned out by the noise. And conspiracy theories that were once on the fringe would become mainstream. People would claim the signal is a government hoax to impose a one-world government. Others would claim the aliens are already here and have been for years. The lack of concrete information would create a vacuum that fear and speculation would rush to fill. There would be riots and civil unrest. Some would protest against their governments for not being prepared. Others would attack the scientific installations involved, fearing they are drawing unwanted attention to our planet. Religious groups who view the aliens as demonic would hold mass rallies, leading to clashes with police and counter-protesters. The psychological toll would be immense. Anxiety and depression rates would soar. People would be unable to sleep, work, or function normally, living in a constant state of low-grade fear. The world would feel unsafe and unpredictable in a way it never has before. Governments would be forced to take drastic measures to maintain order. They might declare martial law, impose curfews, and restrict travel. The internet could be censored or even temporarily shut down in some countries to stop the spread of misinformation. These actions, while possibly necessary, would only fuel more paranoia and distrust in authority. The nature of the signal would determine the level of panic. A simple "hello beacon" is one thing. A signal that sounds menacing or one that we cannot decipher but contains vast amounts of energy would be much more terrifying. And if there is any indication of a physical object heading towards us, the panic would be absolute. The initial period after the announcement would be a global stress test. It would test our ability to remain calm, to think rationally, and to trust our institutions in the face of the ultimate unknown. Well, history suggests we might not pass that test. Number 9, our technology might look like stone tools. The age of the Earth is about 4.5 billion years. Life has existed for about 3.7 billion years. Modern humans have been around for about 300,000 years. Our technological civilization, starting with the Industrial Revolution, is only about 250 years old. Our ability to send and receive radio signals is barely a century old. In cosmic terms, we have just learned to speak. Any civilization we are likely to hear from will almost certainly be older than us. Much older. A civilization just 1,000 years more advanced than us would be hard to comprehend. A civilization 1,000,000 years more advanced would be, for all practical purposes, godlike. The Kardashev scale, proposed by Soviet astronomer Nikolai Kardashev in 1964, classifies civilizations based on their energy consumption. A Type Y civilization can harness all the energy of its home planet. A Type the Second can harness all the energy of its star. A Type the Third can harness the energy of its entire galaxy. Humanity is currently around a 0.73 on this scale. We are not even a Type I civilization yet. The civilization we detect is likely to be a Type the Second or even Type the Third. This technological gap would be the single most important fact about our first contact. It would redefine our relationship with technology. If the aliens decide to share their knowledge, the consequences would be immense and unpredictable. Imagine receiving the schematics for a room temperature superconductor. It would revolutionize everything from energy grids to transportation to computing. Or the plans for a nanotechnology assembler that can build anything from the atomic level up. It would end scarcity and pollution, or the biology behind their own apparent immortality. These things sound like magic to us. To them, they might be basic science. This influx of advanced technology would be a double-edged sword. It could solve all of our most pressing problems. We could cure all diseases, end poverty, and restore our damaged environment. It would usher in a golden age for humanity, but it would also create a massive dependency. We would be using technology we do not fundamentally understand. It would be like giving a smartphone to a caveman. He can learn to use the apps, but he can't fix it if it breaks, and he certainly can't build a new one. If our new alien-provided energy source ever failed, our entire civilization would grind to a halt. We would be technologically helpless. It would also stifle human innovation. Why would a young scientist spend her life struggling to understand a complex problem in physics when the answer is readily available from our galactic benefactor? The drive to discover, to invent, to solve problems is a core part of the human spirit. Receiving all the answers on a platter could lead to a kind of technological and intellectual stagnation, where we would become passive consumers of alien tech, not active creators of our own. There's also the military aspect. Even a piece of seemingly benign alien technology could have terrifying military applications. A new energy source could be turned into a new bomb. A new material could be used to create unstoppable armor. The nation that first figures out how to weaponize the alien tech would have absolute power over every other nation on Earth. The temptation would be irresistible. This could lead to a new terrifyingly advanced arms race, or even a global war fought with weapons we can't even imagine. The discovery would force us to confront our own technological infancy. Our proudest achievements, from our skyscrapers to our space probes, might look like mud huts and stone axes from their perspective. This could be a humbling and useful lesson, inspiring us to learn and grow. Or it could be a crushing blow to our collective self-esteem, leaving us feeling like perpetual children in a universe of adults. The technology itself is neutral. The real question is whether humanity would have the wisdom to use it. Number 8, the Earth would become a planetary heritage site. The World Heritage List, maintained by UNESCO, includes over 1,100 sites, like the Pyramids of Giza or the Great Barrier Reef. These are places deemed to have outstanding universal value that need to be protected for all of humanity. This is a human-centric concept, protecting our history and our nature from ourselves. The discovery of intelligent alien life would expand this concept to a planetary scale. The Earth itself would suddenly be seen not just as our home, but as a precious and possibly rare example of a life-bearing planet. It would become, in effect, a cosmic nature preserve. This would fundamentally change our relationship with our environment. The environmental movement would be re-energized in an instant. For decades, climate change activists have struggled to convey the urgency of the problem. They have used scientific data, economic arguments, and moral appeals. The discovery of aliens would provide them with their most powerful argument yet. We would be forced to look at our planet from an outside perspective. We would see its thin, fragile atmosphere, its interconnected ecosystems, and the damage we are doing to it. The act of polluting our planet would no longer just be an act of self-harm. It would be an act of cosmic vandalism. We would be destroying one of the universe's rare biological treasures. The pressure to act on climate change, deforestation, plastic pollution, and biodiversity loss would become immense. It would no longer be a political issue. It would be a matter of planetary stewardship. We would be the caretakers of a living world, and we would have a galactic audience. This could lead to unprecedented global cooperation on environmental issues. A new Earth Charter could be drafted, with binding commitments for all nations to protect the planet's biosphere. Huge investments would be made in green technology and ecological restoration. The goal would be to clean up our act, not just for our own survival, but to preserve the integrity of our world. It also raises the question of the zoo hypothesis. This is a proposed solution to the Fermi paradox. If aliens exist, why haven't we seen them? The hypothesis suggests that advanced civilizations know we are here, but deliberately avoid contact to allow us to develop naturally. They are observing us as we might observe animals in a nature reserve. If this turned out to be true, it would be a chilling realization. It would mean our planet is an exhibit and we are the animals. Every action we take is being watched. This would create a powerful incentive to behave. The value of biodiversity would also be seen in a new light. Every species on Earth, from the blue whale to the smallest microbe in the soil, is a product of billions of years of evolution on this specific planet. It is a part of a unique biological library. If the aliens we discover are carbon-based and use DNA, then Earth's biodiversity is a variation on a common galactic theme. But if they are fundamentally different, silicon-based, for example, then every living thing on our planet becomes infinitely more precious. It represents one of only two known forms of life. The extinction of a species would no longer just be a tragedy for Earth, it would be a loss of cosmic-level data. This new perspective might be the only thing that could force us to truly take care of our home. We would see that we don't just live on a rock in space, we live in a garden, a fragile and complex system. And we would finally realize that we have a responsibility not just to ourselves, but to the universe to keep it alive. Number 7. The Moon and Mars would become urgent outposts. The last time a human being walked on the moon was in December 1972 with the Apollo 17 mission. For over 50 years, our direct exploration of other celestial bodies has been done by robots. NASA's budget as a percentage of the total federal budget peaked at 4.4% in 1966 during the height of the space race. Today, it is less than 0.5%. Space exploration is seen by many as a luxury, not a necessity. The discovery of alien life would make space exploration a critical priority overnight. It would become a matter of species survival. The rationale is simple and stark. All of our eggs are in one basket. Humanity exists on only one planet. A single catastrophic event, a large asteroid impact, a supervolcano eruption, a runaway pandemic, or a self-inflicted nuclear war could wipe us out completely. This is a familiar argument to space advocates, but it has never had real political traction. An alien signal would make the abstract threat feel real and urgent. We would no longer be just a species that could go extinct. We would be the species that knew there was a wider universe out there and still allowed itself to be wiped out by a single planetary disaster. The cosmic foolishness of it would be unbearable. A new, far more intense space race would begin. The goal would not be flags and footprints. The goal would be to establish self-sustaining human colonies off-world as quickly as possible. The Moon and Mars are the most logical first steps. They are close, and we have already studied them extensively. For governments and private companies would pour trillions of dollars into this effort. We would see a crash program to develop the necessary technologies, reusable heavy lift rockets, closed-loop life support systems, radiation shielding, and techniques for using local resources on the Moon and Mars to build habitats and produce fuel. The technological challenges are immense, but with sufficient funding and political will, they could be overcome. The Moon would likely be first. A permanent, self-sufficient lunar base would be our first lifeboat. It would serve as a scientific outpost, a staging point for further exploration, and a proof of concept that humanity can live beyond Earth. Mars would be the ultimate goal. It has an atmosphere, thin but present frozen water, and all the necessary raw materials to support a large, independent civilization. A successful Mars colony would mean that humanity is no longer a single planet species. We would have a backup. This would not be a purely scientific or survivalist endeavor. It would also be a political and military one. Nations would race to establish their own bases, creating a new arena for geopolitical competition. The Outer Space Treaty forbids claims of national sovereignty, but it's easy to see how a base controlled by one country could become de facto national territory. There would be debates about who governs these new human settlements. Would they be extensions of their home nations, or would they develop new forms of governance? The discovery would also raise a terrifying new security concern. If there is one civilization out there, there are likely others. Are they all friendly? The idea of planetary defense would become a serious concern. We would need to build a system to monitor the entire solar system for potential threats. This could include a network of space-based telescopes and radar systems. We might even begin to develop technologies for deflecting asteroids, which could also serve as a rudimentary defense system against more direct threats. The psychological impact of becoming a multi-planet species would be profound. It would be a concrete step into the larger cosmic community we just discovered. It would be a statement that we intend to survive, to explore, and to take our place in the galaxy. The first child born on Mars would be a symbol of a new future for humanity. A future that began the day we received a signal from the stars. Number 6, all our stories would need a new chapter. Every culture on Earth is built on a foundation of stories. Creation myths, epic poems, religious texts, national histories, and works of fiction. These stories help us understand who we are, where we come from, and where we are going. They are all, without exception, human-centric. They are the story of us. From the Epic of Gilgamesh, written over 4,000 years ago, to the latest blockbuster movie, our cultural output is a mirror reflecting ourselves. The discovery of an alien intelligence would crack that mirror. Every story we've ever told would suddenly feel incomplete. They would be tales from the age of our species' childhood, before we knew we weren't alone. The impact on art and culture would be immediate and pervasive. Film, literature, music, and visual art would become obsessed with the discovery. For the first time, our artists would have a true other to contemplate. Science fiction, once a genre of speculation, would become a genre of urgent commentary. Writers and filmmakers would grapple with the immense philosophical, political, and personal questions raised by the contact. What does it mean to be human in a crowded universe? How do we communicate with a mind that is truly alien? What do we have to offer? What do we have to fear? Our past would be reinterpreted. Historians and archaeologists would look for evidence of past visitations, ancient myths about gods from the sky, strange aerial phenomena, and advanced ancient technologies would be re-examined. The ancient astronaut theory, currently a pseudoscience, would be given serious academic consideration. It would be a hunt for our place in a potentially long and unrecorded galactic history. Did they visit us before? Did they influence our development? Our entire history would be open to a radical new interpretation. Music would change. How do you compose a symphony for an audience that might not share your sense of hearing rhythm or harmony. Composers might try to create music based on mathematical principles like the prime numbers or the hydrogen frequency in an attempt to create a universal art form. Or the sounds we sent on the Voyager Golden Record in 1977, which included music from Bach and Chuck Berry, would be seen as a charming but naive first attempt. The new challenge would be to create art that transcends biology. Our language would evolve. We would need new words to describe new concepts, words to describe alien biology, alien psychology, and the new social realities of a post-contact world. The pronouns we and they would take on a whole new significance. We would mean all of humanity. They would mean the others. The entertainment industry would be transformed. News channels would have 24/7 coverage. Documentaries would dissect every bit of data from the signal. Movies and TV shows would explore every possible angle of the story. The aliens would be the biggest story in history, and our culture would be saturated with it. But there would also be a cultural backlash. Some would argue for a form of cultural preservation. They would fear that our own unique human culture would be diluted or completely overwhelmed by a more advanced alien culture. If their art is more complex, their music more beautiful, and their philosophy more profound, what would happen to our own? Would we abandon Shakespeare and Beethoven for the alien equivalent? This could lead to a kind of cultural isolationism, a movement to protect and celebrate human culture in the face of this overwhelming new influence. Ultimately, the discovery would give us a new grand narrative. For millennia, our story has been one of exploration and settlement of our own planet. We crossed oceans, climbed mountains, and filled every continent. Now, that story is largely over. The discovery of alien life would give us a new frontier, not just a physical one in space, but a cultural and intellectual one. It would be the start of humanity's next great chapter. All our old stories would be prologue. Number 5, we would need a constitution for the cosmos. The body of international law that governs space is small and outdated. The cornerstone is the 1967 Outer Space Treaty. It was written during the Cold War to prevent the US and the Soviet Union from placing nuclear weapons on the moon. It establishes some basic principles. Space is for everyone. You can't claim sovereignty over celestial bodies, and you're responsible for the damage your space objects cause. There are a few other treaties dealing with things like rescuing astronauts and liability. That's about it. This legal framework is completely unprepared for the reality of contact. The discovery of intelligent alien life would create a legal crisis. Our laws are written by humans for humans. They are based on human concepts of property, rights, and personhood. None of them apply to a non-human intelligence. The first legal question would be, what are they? Are they persons under the law? The concept of legal personhood is what grants rights. In the past, this status has been denied to large groups of humans, like slaves or women. Corporations are considered legal persons. We are currently debating whether advanced AI or certain animals should have some form of legal personhood. The question of an alien's legal status would be paramount. If they are persons, they have rights. If they are not, they are property or resources. How we answer this question would say a great deal about us. Then there is the issue of communication. Who has the legal authority to speak for Earth? As of now, nobody does. If a private corporation or a single nation makes contact and establishes a dialogue, do they have the right to keep that information secret? Is it a trade secret, or is it the common heritage of mankind? New international treaties would have to be drafted at emergency speed to regulate this. We would need a contact protocol that lays out exactly who is in charge and what the rules are. If the aliens were to share information, the intellectual property laws would be a nightmare. Can a human patent an alien invention? Current patent law requires an inventor to be a human being. If a corporation deciphers a piece of alien technology, do they own the patent, or does it belong in the public domain? This would lead to massive legal battles between corporations, governments, and public interest groups. And what if they arrive? The legal chaos would be total. Which laws apply to them? If one of them commits a crime on Earth, which court has jurisdiction? If a human harms one of them, what is the charge? Or it's not murder if the victim isn't legally a person. We would need an entirely new branch of law, something we might call synalegal studies or astrojurisprudence. This new legal framework would have to address questions we've never had to consider. What are the rules of engagement if they are hostile? The laws of war are based on the Geneva Conventions, which apply to human combatants. What if they send a self-replicating robotic probe that starts consuming our planet for raw materials? How do you declare war on a machine? The discovery would also force us to create a constitution for our own species' future in space. As we build bases on the Moon and Mars, we will need laws to govern them. Are these colonies subject to the laws of their founding nations, or do they need a new legal system? What are the rights of a human born on Mars? Are they a citizen of a country on Earth, or are they the first Martian citizen? We would need to establish rules for interacting with other potential life forms we might find as we explore. If we discover microbial life on Mars, do we have the right to conduct experiments on it? If we find a complex ecosystem on Europa, do we have the right to drill through the ice and potentially contaminate it? We would need a kind of prime directive, a guiding principle of non-interference. Our current legal systems are a patchwork of local and national rules designed for a single planet with a single intelligent species. They are woefully inadequate for a future in which we are not alone. We would need to build a new legal foundation, not just for governing ourselves, but for our relationship with the rest of the universe. Number 4, the truth would be more unbelievable than the lies. About, 1 in 3 Americans believe that some UFO sightings are alien spacecraft visiting Earth. The belief in government cover-ups and secret conspiracies is a powerful force in modern society. A 2013 poll found that 51% of Americans believe that a secret cabal is plotting to rule the world. For distrust in institutions like the government, the media, and science is widespread. In this climate of suspicion, the confirmation of alien life would not end conspiracy theories. It would pour gasoline on them. The official story, no matter what it is, would be met with intense skepticism by a large portion of the population. Imagine the announcement. A group of scientists backed by the government holds a press conference. They show data, graphs, and a repeating signal from a distant star. For many, the first reaction would not be awe, but suspicion. They would immediately assume that this is not the whole truth. A whole new generation of conspiracy theories would be born. The real story, as told on internet forums and social media, would be far more elaborate. Some would claim the signal is a fake, a false flag operation created by a shadowy world government to panic the population into accepting their authority. The goal would be to create a new world order to protect humanity from a manufactured threat. Others would go in the opposite direction. They would believe the government has known about the aliens for decades, and this weak signal is just a limited hangout. They're only releasing a tiny, sanitized piece of the truth to prepare us for a much bigger revelation later. The real aliens, the theory would go, are not light years away. They are already here. They have treaties with our governments. They are living in secret underground bases. The Roswell incident of 1947 and countless other UFO sightings would be seen as absolute proof. The official announcement would just be the tip of the iceberg. Every detail would be scrutinized for hidden meaning. The specific star system, the frequency of the signal, the people making the announcement, it would all be seen as part of a code. The theories would be complex and self-reinforcing. Any attempt by the authorities to debunk them would be seen as further proof of the cover-up. The problem is that the truth itself would be unbelievable. The reality of a civilization millions of years old with technology indistinguishable from magic, communicating with us from across a gulf of trillions of miles is a difficult concept to grasp. It's a truth that feels more like fiction. In a strange way, a conspiracy theory about a secret deal with aliens in Nevada is more comprehensible. It's on a human scale. It involves familiar motives like power and secrecy. This would create a deep and dangerous rift in society. There would be those who accept the official scientific consensus, and those who believe in a darker hidden truth. This would not be a fringe group, it could be a significant percentage of the population. This reality schism would make any unified global response incredibly difficult. How can you decide on a message to send back when a third of your population thinks you're talking to the wrong aliens, or that it's all a hoax? The media would be in an impossible position. If they report only the official facts, they will be accused of being part of the cover-up. If they give airtime to the conspiracy theories, they will be accused of spreading dangerous misinformation. The trust in any source of information would completely evaporate, leaving people to choose the version of reality that best fits their pre-existing beliefs. The world would become a hall of mirrors, where the real and the imaginary are indistinguishable. The greatest discovery in history would be met with the accusation that it's the greatest lie ever told. Number 3, global defense would point upwards, not sideways. Global military spending in 2022 was an estimated $2.24 trillion. The vast majority of this money is spent by nations to defend themselves from, or project power against, other nations. Our entire military-industrial complex, from aircraft carriers to infantry rifles, is designed for conflicts between humans on the surface of this planet. We point our weapons sideways, the discovery of an alien civilization, even a distant one, would force a complete paradigm shift in global defense. The primary strategic focus would shift from terrestrial conflicts to planetary security. The threat, or potential threat, would no longer be from across the border, it would be from across the galaxy. The immediate result would be the creation of a unified global defense command. Organizations like NATO were created to counter a specific terrestrial threat. A new planetary organization would be needed. It would be a space guard or an Earth defense force. This would require an unprecedented level of military cooperation between historic rivals. The United States, China, Russia, and other major powers would need to share intelligence, technology, and command structures. The technical and political hurdles would be enormous, but the perceived necessity would be overwhelming. There would be a massive redirection of military budgets. Instead of building more tanks and submarines, nations would pour money into space-based defense systems. This would include a global network of surveillance satellites and deep space radar to monitor our solar system and beyond. It would be an early warning system for the entire planet. We would also see the development of directed energy weapons, advanced missile interceptors, and other technologies designed to engage threats in space. This would not be science fiction, it would be the new practical reality of national security. The weaponization of space, long a taboo subject, would become a stated policy goal. The big question would be, are they a threat? Without any data, military planners would have to assume the worst. This is the dark forest theory of the universe. The theory, popularized by author Cixin Liu, suggests that the universe is like a dark forest. It is full of silent hunters. To reveal your location is to invite your own destruction. The wisest course of action for any civilization is to stay quiet. By sending our own signals into space, we may have just screamed, "Here I am," into a forest full of predators. Whether this is true or not, the military would have to operate as if it is. This would create a powerful argument for a massive military buildup in space. This would be a new and astronomically expensive arms race, but this time, we wouldn't be racing against another country. We would be racing against a potential unknown threat. This new military focus would have profound implications back on Earth. The old rivalries wouldn't just disappear. The new space defense infrastructure would become the new arena for competition. Whichever nation controls the planetary defense grid has a powerful strategic advantage. They could use it to spy on or even threaten other nations on Earth. The technology developed for planetary defense could easily be used in terrestrial conflicts. There's also the possibility that the discovery could lead to global disarmament. The threat from space could be so overwhelming that it makes our own conflicts seem trivial and self-destructive. Humanity might decide that we can no longer afford to fight amongst ourselves. We would need all of our resources and all of our unity to face the challenge from the stars. Or it could be the ultimate catalyst for peace on Earth. The discovery would force us to make a choice. We could turn our military power outward in a unified defense of our shared home. Or we could continue our old squabbles, developing new and terrifying space weapons to use against each other. The military doctrines of the 21st century would be rewritten. The new high ground would not be a hill or a mountain. It would be orbit. Number 2, history would start at year 0. We measure our history from various starting points. The Christian calendar counts from the birth of Christ. The Islamic calendar counts from the Hijra. Other cultures have their own systems. These calendars anchor our history in specific human events. Our entire timeline is a record of our own achievements, our own wars, our own religions. It is a provincial history. The confirmation of intelligent alien life would be the single most important event in human history. It would be a dividing line more profound than any other. Everything that came before it would be the pre-contact era. Everything that comes after would be the post-contact era. It would be a new year 0. This would not be a formal decision made by a committee. It would be an intuitive cultural shift. The discovery would so fundamentally change our perspective that it would automatically reset our sense of time. The events of our past, the rise and fall of empires, the world wars, the scientific revolutions would all be recontextualized as events that happened during our species' isolation. They would be the backstory. The main story would start now. Educational curricula around the world would have to be completely rewritten. Our history class would be divided into 2 main subjects, pre-contact and post-contact. Pre-contact history would be the story of how a primitive species on a single planet developed, fought, and eventually reached out to the stars. It would be taught with a new sense of detachment, as if we were studying a long-gone civilization. A post-contact history would be the story that is just beginning. It would be about how humanity reacted to the news, how we organized ourselves, and how we navigated our first steps into a galactic community. The children learning this new history would have a fundamentally different worldview than any generation before them. They would grow up knowing that humanity is not alone. This would be as basic a fact to them as the fact that the Earth is round. Our sense of identity would be tied to this new calendar. People would talk about the first generation born after contact. These individuals would be the first true children of a galactic age. They would not have the memory or the psychological baggage of the pre-contact world. This reset of our historical clock would also change how we view the future. Our current long-term thinking is often limited to a few decades or maybe a century. We think about climate change by 2100 or social security in 2050. The discovery of a civilization that might be millions of years old would force us to think on a much grander timescale. We would start to think about humanity's future, not in terms of centuries, but in terms of millennia. What will our species be like in 10,000 years? In 1,000,000 years, the discovery would give us a new sense of potential longevity. If they can survive for millions of years, perhaps we can too. This would create a new imperative for long-term survival, for making decisions that will benefit our distant descendants. Or projects that seem impossibly long, like terraforming Mars or building interstellar probes, would suddenly seem like practical and necessary steps. The discovery would be the end of our history as a solitary species. It would be the birth of our history as a galactic one. It would be our graduation day. We would no longer be just a product of Earth's history. We would become participants in cosmic history. The calendar on the wall would be a constant reminder that our story is much, much bigger than we ever thought. Number 1, life itself would have to be redefined. We have found life in the most extreme places on Earth. We have found bacteria thriving in boiling volcanic vents on the ocean floor, a place with no sunlight and immense pressure. This is tubeworm Pompeii, where temperatures can reach 80 degrees C. We have found microbes living in the super salty, sub-zero brine of Antarctic lakes. We have found fungi that can survive the vacuum and intense radiation of outer space. These organisms, called extremophiles, have pushed the boundaries of what we thought life could endure. Well, but they are all still our kind of life. They are all carbon-based. They all use DNA. They are all descendants of a single common ancestor that emerged on this planet billions of years ago. The discovery of extraterrestrial life would shatter this biological solitude. It would provide the first ever external data point for what life is. This would force a revolution in biology and philosophy. The first and most fundamental question is, what is it made of? If the alien life is also carbon-based and uses a system like DNA, it would be a stunning revelation. It would suggest that the building blocks of life are not just common throughout the universe, but that they tend to assemble themselves in similar ways. It might mean that life on Earth and life on their world share a common origin spread between star systems through panspermia. It would mean we are related, however distantly. We would be galactic cousins. But what if it's different? What if we find life based on silicon, thriving in a liquid methane ocean on a world far colder than our own? Chemists have long speculated about this possibility. Silicon can form complex molecules just like carbon. A discovery like this would prove that life is not a chemical fluke, but a fundamental property of the universe that can emerge from different chemistries under different conditions. It would mean the universe is not just filled with our kind of life, but with a whole zoo of different biological forms. The very way we search for life would change. Currently, our search is biased. The James Webb Space Telescope looks for biosignatures in the atmospheres of exoplanets. And it looks for gases like oxygen and methane, things associated with life on Earth. If we find a completely different form of life, we would realize we have been looking for the wrong things. We would need to develop new methods to detect biosignatures from life that doesn't breathe oxygen or metabolize in ways we understand. The discovery would also force us to confront the definition of life itself. Our current definitions are based on a checklist of properties, metabolism, growth, reproduction, and so on. This is a fragile definition. A fire metabolizes and grows. A crystal can reproduce by seeding other crystals. We have never had to seriously defend our definition because we've only had one example. What if the alien life is a vast planet-spanning intelligence made of interconnected crystalline structures that thinks on a timescale of millennia? What if it's a form of self-organizing plasma in the heart of a star? What if it's a disembodied consciousness that exists as a pattern of information in the fabric of space-time? Our biological checklist would be useless. We would need a new, more fundamental definition of life. It might be based on information theory. Life could be defined as any system that can store and replicate information and evolve through natural selection. Or it might be based on thermodynamics. Life could be defined as a system that locally reverses entropy, creating order out of chaos. This would be more than just a scientific reclassification. It would be a philosophical one. It would blur the line between living and non-living, between biology and physics. It would suggest that life is not something special that happens on a few lucky planets. Or it might be a common emergent property of complex systems, as natural as the formation of a star or a galaxy. The discovery of even a single alien microbe would be the most profound discovery ever made. It would prove that the universe is not sterile. It would tell us that the creative spark that ignited on our world has also ignited on others. It would transform life from a local phenomenon into a universal one. And it would tell us, finally and forever, that we are not a miracle. We are a statistic, and that may be the most wonderful realization of all.